Hello, I'm Earl, and welcome to Oral Gibbs Live. With me, I have a very, very interesting gentleman on the program. Many, many years ago, long decades ago, he was one of my few guests that came on the program and really had people going, both in a good way and a little bit in a bad way. They got accustomed to him, and now he's a household name and he's world renowned. That's why. World renowned, the one and only Mr. Lasana Sekou. I know.
Greetings, my brother. Thank you.
I see this in watching.
I know what you're talking
What
about.
kind of introduction you making? I was speaking the other day about you, and the first program we did.
Yeah.
I don't know you remember that.
Yes, yes. Someone I was telling about that recently. Too.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I always remember you.
It was incredible,
story.
huh?
Yes. I
Wow.
remember that story. Yeah.
The reason why it's so incredible is to see where you are. That was 1984.
I didn't remember the year.
Yeah,
Okay.
and now you're an international man. You're known all over the world.
We do our work. We do what we can.
And your style of poetry, that's the other thing. Your style of poetry is so different. And now I see other people imitating it. So when people are imitating you, that means it's good.
In a way, yeah, yeah. And
Right.
I think it encourages people to be able to express themselves so openly.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of that style, I remember, too, influenced me from the Black American poets coming out of the 60s and the 70s, the dub poets as well. But I add a St. Martin touch relative to the languages, relative to how we intersperse language and sound and so on. So there's that which is unique about it, and then there's that which is influences from elsewhere. So it's interesting that you say, because sometimes I do see some of the younger poets doing it, and I'm like, wow, that's good. Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
But you're a publisher.
Yeah.
House of Nahesi, again, stands out in the Caribbean from a very small
Indeed.
island. You were all in newspaper publication, a lot of things. I don't
I'm listening. It's like, yeah, but you know, it's we do. It's like with yourself here as a media man, have gone from being a reporter to being in the management to spearheading ideas of what a talk show excellence should be, and providing that service to a nation. When that happens at a level that is dynamic, then at least dynamic, because it means you keep trying, you keep working at it each time. Of course, it spreads out. You know, it influences others. You keep learning as well, and I try to do that with the work I do, whether it's in the media, whether it's in the House of Nahesi Publishers as a publisher, and it helps us to attract customers, writers, audiences from both at home and abroad, and that's part of what's going on.
Well, you know, we're going to speak about that, but I want to go back to something else you did. And we spoke about it many, many years ago. That's the unity flag.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
Tell us about the unity flag, because it's been a lot of discussion.
Yeah, it's been in the news in unique ways of late. And you know, we should note, even before going back, when it was acknowledged by the governments in both of our capitals, Marigot and Great Bay, last year, I think it was a courageous act for both administrations, of both government leaders, to do it. Prime Minister Silvera and President Louis Mussington, to acknowledge it in a formal way, as a symbol of unity of the St. Martin people, because that's its basic meaning and its basic reason. But the people of St. Martin, over the years, that's exactly how it was being used and how it was growing in use. And usually, I think it's a case where an activity or a symbol or an engagement that takes on a kind of a groundswell among the public, and then the leadership comes to it, as opposed to the other way around. But remember, as you said, you spoke with us, and you were there too. That's how we threw it out. We said we putting this out as a symbol of the St. Martin people. Here are the meanings of the colors and the symbols in the canton. It's a symbol of our unity that we have lived, a historic unity that we have made. It's not dependent on The Hague or in Paris. This is what we've done. And I think that clocked into people, and it kept growing like that. By the time both governments decide to acknowledge it, which I think, like I said, was a courageous thing, I think, given the territorial relationships that they are in, and that they have individually and even together in certain instances relative to Europe. It took courage to do that, plain and simple, for what these type of things mean, especially flags, But it had already been going down the road a long time with the people in different ways.
What year was it that you started?
90, I believe. 1990 is when it was launched at the Jubilee Library. And even then it was in front of such an audience that included both leadership and folks from both sides of the island. So from the very beginning, it had that touch. What I didn't realize in terms of text, because we had to do a presentation to the Parliament here in the south of our island, is that we had both political leaders in office at that time, Mayor Albert Fleming and Senator Claude Watty, had commented on it. And I didn't remember how the comments were. And so going back into the data to find the material to do the presentation, which was done at the invitation of the Prime Minister Sylvia and her ministry, that I read both of them had, I don't want to use the word identify, but had clocked into what the signal means and said that they look forward to the people of St. Martin using this symbol. And now that went into the news.
Right.
And for example, we had a text or telex in those days. I don't remember what fax from Claude Watty acknowledging it. We had an interview that I believe it was Erna May did with Albert, with the mayor, and both were in that direction of it. So what it became by the use among the people, some of the early leadership had already, indicated its importance of how it should be used. I think Mayor Albert Fleming said he looked forward to the day when the people of St. Martin would use it, because it was within, I think, weeks or months that the interview from the launch, that the interview was conducted. So it wasn't as widely used as yet. So to see what happened to it, I think is important, because I think it clocks into, it's telling of something within the people of St. Martin, that historical unity at the ground level, the core of the St. Martin culture. And folks who come and identify and become part of our nation, they recognize that unity is historic. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, or for the better part, they also clocked into it, because it's not only symbolically important for the solidity of our nation, but it's also very useful. Yeah. In times of emergencies and so on, you want what you can do in the south, you can't do in the north. When the north might not be functioning, you can do it in the south. That kind of back and forth. Right. And in the old days as well, when there was, during the different world wars, when something had to be smuggled from the south or smuggled from the north because it wasn't in use in one place or the other. So there's this very functional relationship to this historical unity that works for the people of St. Martin. It may not work at its best for The Hague or for Paris, but it works for the people of St. Martin. The unity flag clocks into all of that. The symbols in it draws from the folk culture that we have made, and I think that is vital to it. And so I want to end that run over by saying what I've noticed compared to previous years, since that acknowledgement by both governments, not 1 month has passed this year without either an individual or an institution using the unity flag and posting online in social media about it. I think that is telling you, that's another story. That's another chapter that's coming into play. Not one single month has passed. And so before, we always had it used throughout the year, but the consistency and by the variety of people using it as a concrete evidence of its use, of its manifestation, I think we are seeing more of it since the acknowledgement.
1990.
Yes.
1990 was a very crucial year for St. Martin.
Very true.
1990 was the year when Claude made a statement that literally destroyed him. Because the Dutch was very angry with that speech of November 11, 1990.
Indeed.
So I don't know if you recall that, but it was very interesting year. Here you had a man who believed in St. Martin. On the Dutch side, on the French side, you had Mayor Fleming, again another St. Martin who believed in St. Martin. And I have the draft that was given to me with the notes on the St. Martin flag that Claude
That's
had.
archival.
Yes, from what, 1980. 385, somewhere there. It's always celebrated on the 13th of June. And so the flag, when you brought it out, the unity flag, I can recall, people were a little hesitant, couldn't understand that.
Yes.
How you feel today, you look back 33 years, right, to 1990, it's a huge difference.
A big difference, and it's encouraging. It's encouraging for us to keep pressing on. It's encouraging for us to continue to work, especially with young people in young groups who are coming up with brilliant ideas, or with trying ideas, or with tentative ideas of how to continue contributing to the development of St. Martin as a nation, both within both territories and working together as one island. And that is something that I continually invest in my own writings still, and I shouldn't say still, but in my own writings,
Right.
but also with relative to what the flag meant and continued to mean. And I think one of the largest manifestations that probably impressed the administrations and wider audiences is what happened to it during the demonstration on the border, the demonstration against the lockdowns and so on, or when the lockdowns went a bit too far, and you had over 2,000 people at the border monument in the September 16th, I believe it was. And the only symbol that the people were using and waving to signify the unity that they were standing up and fighting for across economic groups, across immigrant groups that feel to be part of the St. Martin nation, was the unity flag. And I remember President Louis Mussington said that he came out and he was standing with some friends on one of the higher elevations, and when he saw the sea of unity flag just flooding in towards from both sides towards the border frontier monument, it was just an amazing thing to behold. And remember too, President Mussington was one of those younger people in those days, coming out of the late 80s, right? The early to mid 80s, right up until the 90s, who was part of that energy. The energy you spoke of quite correctly, and as a media man, you were into it, both in interviews and in observation. It started, not that it started, but there was a kind of a rumbling coming out of the mid to late 80s relative to change, relative to want to see how we can better take charge of our situation as St. Martin people. The flag came out of that as well. The flag didn't invent that. It came out, it was a kind of a response to what was happening among the St. Martin people. And I think that's why too, as you say, you use the word correctly. When it came out, there wasn't, oh, we can't do that. It was a tentative approach. You hit it right on the head. It was like, yeah, it was a hesitation. What does it mean? But as the years went on, and the meaning of the flag kept true to itself, more and more people took to it, and that's what we're seeing now.
And what about, the first time that the border was closed was in September of 1995.
Was that when they had the issue with the Port de Plaisance property and so on?
No,
was it
no.
that one?
No, a lot of people don't realize this, but we had Hurricane Lois on the 5th of September,
Okay.
remember? And I was going to Marigot with my wife, and when I got to the border, it was closed. And people were screaming.
Of course.
Because, hey, you had people on the southern side
Yeah.
and others on the northern side. And we all wanted to go to visit our families or go home. And I had a camera. I remember being pushed by the...
You still have the coverage? You have the footage?
I have to look for that.
Beautiful.
I remember being pushed by French soldiers back over the border with my wife.
Yeah.
And I picked up the phone. I had a cell phone, and I called the governor. Dennis Richardson was governor at the time. I said, Governor, look, I'm at the border. Hundreds of people are here right now, and they can't cross over because the French soldiers are stopping them.
Yeah.
And that's when he intervened and had that problem fixed. So the first time was in September of 1995. But I think what has happened with the pandemic was different because he had a long shutdown.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was separating us as a people.
Yeah, yeah. And I think people rightly saw that, because you remember too, both of us are in a colonial situation. We can call it whatever kind of name we want. A monkey dressed up in a mini dress is still still a colony. So both territories at one level are operating within a status that is set for them ultimately, that they are permitted to use essentially. And both sides since 2007, 2009, and then 2010 have had a kind of an enhanced autonomy, an adjusted autonomy autonomy. So that is being exercised as well. And so you have that. And then you have the pressures coming in from the colonial heads in The Hague and in Paris, directing ultimately what is to happen between both sides, because they see both sides as separate territories, as territories belonging to them, as foreign territories. But what we live and what we have lived for hundreds of years, and what the new peoples who become part of the St. Martin nation and legacy see and realize and benefit from and become and end up believing in as well, is that this is one island. This is one island and this is one nation. It's two territories that are administered, differently by European colonial countries, who don't want to be called colonial countries anymore. So they have all these, fancy names, Outre-mer, country within, stop,
Because the negative connotation.
Exactly. But you already remember too, because we studied this, we are of a similar generation that studied these texts. You remember when they used to brag? Whose colony are you? Like when we would travel, when our people would travel to Europe, who do you belong to? They will ask us. Dare they? And that was from the average level to the administrators, to the governments, to their royal families. Who do you belong to? Are you one of ours?
I had a confrontation with an immigration officer in Puerto Rico.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Like where you going? That kind of thing. So because we have worked at denouncing that, and not just St. Martin, but it's a worldwide phenomenon coming out of the late 50s and so on, that has turned the tide essentially in varying ways, and there's still significant struggles as to how you're perceived, what you can do as countries that on territories that were once or that are still colonized, and how you can behave, how you can manifest yourself. Right. And we take courage and strength from what we see right here in our region. Once upon a time we had to do examples all over the world, but we can see right here in our region, by all measures of modern countries, we are seeing countries succeeding, from St. Kitts down to Barbados and up and down our archipelago. Right. And that's because people are working at it. And it takes time, and sometimes we try to pop style on people, but you have to understand, I like this one, I'm older than most countries in our region. Not the territories, the countries, right? I had a little trouble growing up, and I wasn't a bad kid, right? You don't think a country with 100,000 people or 9 million people are going to have a little bit of a problem getting itself together? Or what? We're not supposed to have that time and that space, but countries that have
good for that.
And the countries who are telling us that we are failing and we are troubled, that we end up believing in, they had their Taktakayadlok or Orlok and their 100-Year War, 2 civil wars of the last century that nearly wiped out Europe. Oh, they can do it. Right. They can, but we can't. We can't take our time to grow and to change and to negotiate among each other. And I use, because this is the anniversary year as well, CARICOM. And I always say that the two West Indies Federation failed. And people like to bite on that. Oh, the West Indies Federation. Yeah, the two West Indies Federation failed because London wanted it. But what do the general talk, even among some scholars sometimes, who do they blame? Oh, they blame the island because one wanted it in they wanted the capital of it in their island and so on. Nonsense. They failed because London wanted it. The CARICOM, by any measure of modern regional formation, structures, and formats, is succeeding because sovereign countries are working at it. So are they going to have a bit of a problem in yes. We have problems managing our household. We have problems going to school. Exactly, by any measure. Yeah. So this is growth. And so it's the same thing with the notion of St. Martin unity, St. Martin identity, the development of autonomy. The movements that led to autonomy on both sides of St. Martin, the advanced or adjusted autonomy on both sides, came out significantly, not out of a push by The Hague and Paris, but by the St. Martin people demanding more services, better services within their territory relative to the regional, the European regional colonial setup that they were attached to. Yeah. The Netherlands Antilles and the commune relative to Guadeloupe. It wasn't, and those islands, Curaçao and Guadeloupe, was going through the same and is going through the same kind of colonial frustration and tension and adjustment and oppression as we are. So it was the capitals of those. But what do? We end up, because of the way it's structured, and the education system too plays that role, we end up blaming each other. We end up blaming the whole nation. It's not the whole nation. Colonialism is an anomaly to the better and best development of the human being, of the human polity, of the human using political management for its betterment. And this is part of what we are dealing with. And the flag falls into that, because the flag is rallying people to say, you have your own, you can do it yourself. You have a history of working together. How can you continue that? How can you tweak that? How can you make it better? And the St. Martin Unity flag works into that.
Let me ask you now about the flag that's on the screen, about the colors.
Well, are we looking at it? Yes. You should have. I should have brought the descriptions. In general. We're talking of the green, of course, and the green represents the land of St. Martin, the entire island of St. Martin, its resources, its richness, and so on. The blue at the bottom represents the sea. And again, we're talking about resources and the richness of that as part of of how we can, what feeds us.
And that's become a problem now.
Imagine.
Because I saw something on social media where French authorities are stopping boats.
Territorial issues. And territorial issues ultimately defy or block or prevent the unity of St. Martin. It has to. It has to, and it will come in other areas as well. So that represents the sea. And again, we talk about our resources. The red line represents the blood of the St. Martin people running through familial relationships and friendships and succession lands and trade and back and forth. So it runs through like a line, through our history and across our land. And it's a claim. It lays claim to this entire island as belonging to its people, to our people, to St. Martin. And then the blue, the lighter blue at the top represents, basically, I use the term, the sky is the limit. And so there is no limit to our freedom that we can work for, that we are responsible to work for, and that we will be rewarded from by working for. But that must be determined by us as the St. Martin people. It cannot be determined by France and the Netherlands, because their interest ultimately is not in our best interest. It cannot be. That is not the nature of colonialism, of imperialism. It's not the nature of racism that has been exercised within our history. So we have to do it ourselves again. And we do it in allegiance and in alliance with decisions we make. And who we will trade with. I always make the joke when I talk with my friends. I say, an independence in Martin, ultimately, its strongest partners in trade and so on probably still will be the Netherlands and France, because there's that kind of historical material history connection. So that is normal, but it's also going to be enhanced and stronger within our own region and within the hemisphere, which is already indicates in itself, because in terms of the hemisphere, the US is one of the more consistent trading and travel, or we've had the most consistent of trade and travel relationship, because we are in this hemisphere, we are in this region. So that is normal. So, and then the yellow represents symbolically the brightness of the future, but it also represents the Caribbean sun that also nourishes the land, and so symbolically it nourishes the land, but it also speaks to the issue of hope. And again, what you work for, what you build for, what you organize for, who you have network and alliances with to forward your independence. All independence ultimately is grounded in that people and their core values, their core history. But it's an evolving process, and it also is connected then to the world. The world is your oyster, so to speak. Right now, we are locked in significantly sometimes to trade, and a lot of things St. Martin got away with, as opposed to, say, Guadeloupe and Curaçao relative to trade, is because we were left alone. We were abandoned. And that boy, Junior Lake, always had this thing, say, when there's an oppressor or any type of system that tries to bully you or overlord over you, he said, when they leave you alone, or when they boycott you, Junior Lake always said, they're freeing you. So you had that. But what do we see since the same 90s that you speak of, the same 90 coming up, is that there's a kind of an intensification of getting into the claws of the colonial countries into St. Martin. So you're seeing more tension, more conflict. A lot of the tensions and conflict that we're feeling internally within each territory and between territories is because there's an intensification that wasn't there before relative to the Hague.
But we were forgotten, left alone to do what we wanted
rest
to
my
do.
case. I rest my case. And so the yellow represents that future and that hope that we are working for and fighting for, and it's bright. It's to be, because we can make it such. And then in the canton you have the symbols that we forged, and even within the structures we were in. So you will see that kind of a mescla of symbols. You have the branches, like two laurels on the side. Within the canton, you have the tamarind branch, which again is a fruit that is resourceful. It's a tree that was vital during the enslavement, not just for the border issues and not just as a fire breaker, but it was also as basic as a shade for the enslaved people who were abused on the plantations here in St. Martin. And the fruit that comes from it is a multi-dimensional source, if I can put it like that, of richness, of health, and again of produce that can be traded within and beyond. So again, we're talking about resources. We're talking about, in addition to the symbols, this flag is also speaking to the very material resources that is part of what will enrich us over time, that will add it to whatever we're doing now and in the future. And so you have the two stars as well on the side of the obelisk, and they represent the both parts as they are, because that piece have been forced to the point that there are structures that we have to attend with. And those two flags represent that. So the both territories are within this space, seeking to cooperate, to work better for their interest. And we have we have the obelisk, which is the frontier monument, but it's symbol as something that a decision was made to set that up, to acknowledge, not division. Because the partition treaty, the Concordia Treaty, is a treaty of division. It's not a treaty about unity. And for those who try to force it into saying that it's for the people of, it's not. It's a business contract. In Article 5 of the Concordia Treaty, the reference to property was included us, the majority of the peoples of this land, the black peoples of this land, as enslaved people. So it is not a thing of pride. It is not something that unites us. It is not. It is a division. It's a part. That's what it's called, a partition treaty. And so the obelisk was to counter that, was to set by the St. Martin administration at that time as early, because we acknowledging over time what we've done or what we've tried to do, to set a marker that says, we are one people. Just like the St. Martin Day. The St. Martin Day wasn't set up to honor Columbus. It wasn't set up to honor the French and the Dutch. No. Exactly. And this is clear. And I think
it's very clear, because the late Wadi said it on my program.
Very clear. Very clear.
He got together with Dr. Petty.
Exactly. It was set up to unite the people of St. Martin. So it was a celebration of the people of St. Martin's unity. In fact, it was like a day off from being French and Dutch, if I could put it in a raw kind of way. It was to be St. Martiners. And so the
proud Caribbean people.
Indeed. Yes. You remember that? You remember that line? And so the obelisk is one of the early attempts at that. Literally, and so it's acknowledged in there, and remember, this flag is suggesting something that is evolving as well. Yeah. At the base of it, you have the rock walls, relative to our labor and relative to claim of land and set up. And the rock walls are set up in the shape of the salt pyramids, which were a significant part of not the labor that we were forced into doing, but it acknowledges the symbol of the Great Salt Pond as the cradle of the St. Martin Nation. Why would we call it the cradle of the St. Martin Nation? Because while the plantations kept us apart and away from each other, for the centuries during the salt reaping, the Great Salt Pond sucked in the labor from both sides of the island, all the plantations, and from surrounding islands at points, at its peak points. And what happened there is that, remember, we were not permitted between plantations to visit our family, our loved ones, our husbands, our wives, our children that were taken away from us as children, sometimes as infants, as things. But on this period of the salt reaping in the Great Salt Pond, the people would see each other again. It will become a period of exchange of information and news, and to see your children that you didn't see for the whole year because you needed permission to leave one plantation to the next, and you would only get that permission if you were on the business of the slave owner. And so the Great Salt Pond is the cradle of the St. Martin Nation because it constantly brought us together in this pool, in this font of unity, of being able to see each other, to pass news about runaways, to pass news about emancipation. This is how we get to know what was happening island-wide and within the region as a people. Paula, which you know his work in his book Vreja Slaven, and this was an early book, Paula, the historian from Curaçao, he made a point that I always remembered, and that was even before we did the book National Symbols, which includes the information about the unity flag. And he says, because of what was happening in the Great Salt Pond, because of what we were making as our material history and human dignity history in the Great Salt Pond, he said the people of St. Martin had long constituted themselves into a united slave community. This is vital.
Yeah.
You didn't get permission to do that, and you would never get permission to do that.
Right.
This is something you fought for. This is something you worked for. This is something that we did in relation to the same family ties and friendship ties that we talk about now, that we say the unity flag represent. And so that's what's symbolized. At the bottom of the, before we go to the last thing on the top, at the bottom you will see the aloe plant. Right?
Yeah.
And that is relative to healing of the nation, healing relative to the historical wrongs between the peoples, including those who were enslaved and those who were the enslavers' descendants. So you need that period, that resolution, that a kind of a reconstitution relative to healing in order to move forward as one nation. And that is the symbol of the aloe plant in there. And remember, these symbols are drawn from folk traditions, because we know the aloe,
right.
the aloe plant is used as symbols for protection against evil, but we also know it's a health, very much.
Drink it.
There you go, and it's a healing thing, you know. Exactly. So you see, again, we're using the multidimensional layers of meaning, and then on the top of the canton and that side of the unity flag, you have the brown pelican, which is the symbol, which is one of the most ancient symbols of St. Martin, or on St. Martin. And throughout the region and around the world, the pelican is such a great and graceful symbol. We had the traditional motto, the traditional saying of the gale doesn't stop at the frontier. Well, neither. The pelican doesn't stop at the frontier neither. The pelican goes in whichever pond, whichever shore or bay that he and she wish. And the symbol of sacrifice relative to the pelican is, I think, unique. And it's universal. There are a number of institutions and countries and so on in the region and around the world that uses it as a symbol. But certainly for us, we call it's the nation's bird. And a lot of us use the term, it's the national bird. We do that on both sides of the island because it's so prominent, it's so visible, it's so graceful and strong. There's a saying relative to the pelican that during times of hardship, it is so self-sacrificing relative to the perpetuation of itself and its children and its future and so on, that it will cut its breast with its beak to feed its young on its own blood to survive, that kind of thing. So it's a kind of a very deep symbol relative to that. And so, and then to round it off at the base now, the complete opposite side at the base, with the aloe plant being used as a sheet, you have the sword of St. Martin. Now, the sword of St. Martin means, the St. Martin in that term, in that name, means the island, right? So there's an inference, yes, if you will, and we said that in the definition, to the bishop saint that is very popular, which the island was named after during the colonial period. But it's the sword symbolizes universally as well justice, it symbolizes defense, it symbolizes bravery, and that's a universal symbol. And so that's what we brought in there. The fact that it's sheeted by the aloe plant means that justice and bravery and defense is tempered by healing. It's tempered by that kind of protectiveness and so on. So all that symbolism, which we describe, much better than I have described it in the book National Symbols of St. Martin.
But you are the creator of the
yes, but in addition, what is so key about that, I think that again to bring in others and to work with others, the launch of it was done by a committee of people, so 3 or 4 people, an ad hoc committee of folks who organized or who worked with me to organize the launch of the flag. But in terms of the design and in terms of the description of the meanings and the research for that, yes, I did do that.
When you look at St. Martin today and you go back at that day when hundreds of people walked from both sides with that flag, what goes through your mind?
I think it's it's an encouragement again. I like to use the word encouragement because we're still working at what can make us better, what can make us more united, what can make us more triumphant, more prosperous, more just as a just democratic society. And so when I see that, it's an encouragement because it's a concrete manifestation of the meaning of the flag. So the flag was rallying the people, and the people was holding the flag and rallying themselves, but they were doing it exactly with the symbol that almost encourages people to do that says that's what we want you to do.
Flags are powerful.
Oh, it's amazing.
Remember what happened to America when St. Eustatius was the first country in the world.
Indeed, the first territory then.
I still call it country.
Indeed, but that's just the symbol of
it. Part of
and that's an interesting piece of history.
And what happened there, right?
Yeah, that they would salute the new republic.
Right.
So
so now, here we are in the Caribbean, going through a very difficult pandemic and suffering. A lot of people suffering, by the way.
Yes.
And it's like the flag
indeed
brought us together.
And so the whole element of unity, of healing, of justice, of doing what is right, let's work together rather than divide us to say, oh, you're going to divide us into these territories, and then, the instructions still have to come down from elsewhere to manage the situation ultimately, in addition to what is rightfully being done. Because I always says that I found that the medical and health services did an excellent job on both sides of the island. I always give them credit for that. And they were managed by our people. But we're looking at a supra situation, and the people were saying, no, enough is enough, and we know we have to be careful, and we know we have to wear the mask, or we know that this is a health issue, but is it also being engaged as a kind of a test of how far both colonial structures can go to manage these people apart? And I think all that too became part of the challenge. We were saying, no, we're not going to let this happen. And so I think those are some of the things that, because the history of colonialism, that's what it does. It's not a history. The history of colonialism is not one of unity. It's not one of uniting the people who were colonized or who were subject within the territory. The flag defies that, and it says we are one people. We can work together. We can do what is in each other's interest, and we can acknowledge what is healthy, how to do it in a safe way, but at the same time, don't use this as a kind of a pretext to take advantage, to suffer us anymore. And who is suffering us from? From each other. I can't listen. There were literally children running through the hills. I'm not exaggerating. I call him a citizen journalist, Mr. Javoy, because he had some tapes of it, and he was one of those online who was continually showing these different types of images that the general media wasn't showing. They had children who had to run through the hills. Are you serious? To get to school from one side or the next because of the blockage. So you were messing with the children. You were messing with trade. You were messing with the families. You were messing with people being able to look. There are people on both sides of the island who go to each other's homes to look out for each other in a caretaker kind of way. Yeah. All of that human relationship,
we're very connected.
There you go, was being messed with in an official way.
Yeah.
By governments, and by governments that were ultimately subjected to these overseeing administrations. So I think that's part of what people were fighting.
It also shows that they have 2 European colonial powers.
Indeed.
But they haven't been successful at really colonizing the families and the people of the
Beautifully said, Perfect, perfect. And ultimately, you will find a lot of the symbols in the unity flag speaks to the issue of family, to the island as one family, and that doesn't take away from structural differences and structural challenges and so on. But at the core, what makes it work? What makes, no matter what the fuss may be or the argument may be, what makes that people come back and say, "Well, let's go have a drink or something." We can deal with that another time. What makes it, and I just use that as a kind of a material matter. But what ultimately makes it work? What ultimately makes that people continually reach out to each other, hundreds of years in the making, and obviously being worked, as you said it earlier as well, and I say it often, having been left alone. So having been left alone, you realize, wait a minute, it can work when we work with each other.
Yeah.
And that is key to the unity of the St. Martin nation as one nation that is separated into two territories. That's essentially. So some people say, oh, it's two nations. No, it's not. It's not. It's definitely not two countries. It's not two nations. It's one nation that is separated into two territories. And those two territories now, to the degree that the people of St. Martin are within the administration of those two territories, they too continually reach out to work with each other, whether it's in health areas and business or in tourism and so on. And we want to see that encouraged. The symbol of the unity flag is a rallying symbol. It's a concrete manifestation of saying, this is what we have. This is why it is important, and this can be our future.
This is who we are.
This is who we are. I couldn't say it better.
I got to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to continue speaking with Mr. Lasana Sekou. He's publisher, author, poet, creator of the St. Martin flag, and a lot more. This gentleman right here, you've seen him right on camera. We're going to be right back. Please stay us right here on Oral Gibbs Live.
Hey, don't guess about your insurance. Be sure that you're covered. Like with your car. Like your home. Be sure to be covered in case of a fire, flood, hurricane, or some other natural disaster. And travel insurance. Because you never know what could happen when you're on vacation. You could lose your passport, your luggage, or have an accident. So be sure that you're covered.
Insure yourself fast and easy with Be Sure from the Windward Islands Bank Limited. Visit your preferred WIB branch, WIB Insurance Services, or BeSureStMartin.com. Get your Be Sure insurance at the Windward Islands Bank, your partners in progress.
For real? Somebody came in here and steal my curtains? Well, it's a good thing I'm insured with Be Sure. Because even the contents of my apartment are covered. Don't play guessing games with your insurance. Be sure.
Are you be sure? Be sure.
My guest on Oral Gibbs Live is Mr. Lasana Sekou. He's here with me, and you're either watching us on YouTube, Facebook, or listening to us on Hot 99.9 FM radio. And you brought along a number of This was the poems of one.
That's the recent publication by the Amisium folks, Mark Yokoyama, and so they published a slim collection of some of my poems from early to recent. To use basically in the high schools in the north of our island. There's a special relationship they have with the schools. But what happened, I think the success of it, if I can use that word, or the promotion of it, the book is called 6 Poems, and it's in 3 languages, the English, the Spanish, and so you have the schools in here in the south, the high schools have also acquired copies of St. Dominic and so on. So that's good to see. And again, produce material. We speak about this all the time as well. Produce material that folks can use in different areas that is a manifestation of this, what is successful in St. Martin, or what we struggle with, or what we challenge with. But we can have that material across generations to study, to review, to change, to add to. And so rather than just talking about it, what can we add materially with each other, or networking and so on, that we can have material to work with to transform our societies. And as you know, as basic as that volume is, it's part of that. It's part of that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. But you recently published a book by a gentleman by the name of Bailey.
Yeah, this is interesting,
That's
isn't
incredible.
it?
You know
Isn't
why?
it? Yes.
You all
Renee
sent
Bailey.
you all sent the release.
Yeah.
And the other day I was looking at the numbers that the average person can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw like 3,000 people looking at it.
Yeah.
I'm amazed.
I'm amazed as well. And the title of it, and it's a study on leadership.
Yeah.
School leadership, in fact,
Educators,
and
yeah.
education.
Yeah.
And he's a St. Martin man. He Rombo native, went to Milton Peters College, but he left here early and got involved with education. His studies, his bachelor's, master's, and PhD is in education in the U.S. and Florida.
But in the Virgin Islands, it seems to be popular. I saw a lot of traffic
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
area.
Because people they see what it's about. The topic is essential. It's school leadership, and it's a slim volume, but it's also like a manual. How can you improve the leadership of your school as the principal of the school? It really focuses on principles, so both primary and high school.
Yeah.
But it's also one that can use for college leadership.
Right.
You know, we were surprised at it. Suja Ref is the one who kept encouraging him to publish.
Oh,
you know, and so he retired young, because you saw the picture. He's a young man, you know, but over 30 years of experience in this business. You know, imagine, right?
Where he lives now?
He lives in Florida. You know, he comes down for the book fairs. In fact, he did one or two workshops over the years for the St. Martin Book Fair. And so we decided, hey, we could do this. And as a St. Martiner who have this type of information and who writes with such clarity, you know, it's like basic writing. I'm amazed at it as well. And I think we have a few copies at Arnia and maybe at Van Dorp, I think, you know. And we plan to, because we had to postpone the book fair, but we will still have it at the end of the year, and we will have a launch for it at that time, so people will be able to get more copies as well.
I'm surprised at the interest shown in the book.
That's what's exactly. You know.
So you all are publishing so many different books. You have some others here you brought me.
Yeah, we brought you an archival.
Yeah.
Every now and then we do, especially with the Pioneer Series booklets and some of our other books over the years. We will make a contribution to schools, or this year we decide we will do it to some of the media houses. I think we did the print media before. I think this is for the broadcast media, and we will give them like a sample of our books over the years. So that's the sample you have there, and it comes up from publications from the 90s, from the 2000s up to the most recent. And so the idea is to show that we have this material that can be used in different ways. You know, a media man or woman who might be doing a report on something, or have to go interview someone in government or in business and so on, may need some concrete information to do a kind of comparative analysis, or to say, well, such and such happened in 2011, and the administration said this will change, however, and here's the record where you said it. And it's in a book, and it's retrievable. Books tend to be, over time, more retrievable than newspapers. Because newspapers, you file them, and then you may not be able to find it again. That's one of our work, or our roles, if you will, at House of Nehesi Publishers, to publish material, to publish books that are useful to people, whether it's in the fine arts, literature, so it's poetry, it's plays, it's novels, it's short stories, fictions, more or less, but in historical areas, in areas of history, in areas of the cultural arts, that's productive, biographies, autobiographies. This is part of what we do. And as a result of continuing at it, we've been able to draw in authors, including noted authors from the region. So when somebody like a George Lamming publishes with us here in St. Martin, or Rafael Nino Feliz out of the Dominican Republic, he published with us last year or year before. And so that kind of reach, you know, and it's still baby steps. It's piece by piece. It's from one day to the next, 1 month to the month. But being there and be able to produce and having the material to show the quality and the value and the usefulness of what you produce, that's part of what we push for.
Didn't Lamin pass away away? Or?
Yes.
I know you brought him on this show many years ago. If you remember.
Yes,
oh,
I did.
He's an incredible guy. Man.
Oh, he's
What a
tremendous,
gentleman.
man. And these type of people are those who, when we talk of who are we as Caribbean people, what makes us work, what makes us tick, what makes us challenge each other, what makes us in the final run still embrace each other or be helpful, or what makes us sometimes discriminate against each other. He's one of the writers that is just the writer to read, to understand this
It's amazing
thing.
to reading the book, but then speaking with the person face to face.
Isn't it something? Isn't it
It's
something?
incredible.
It's
It's
incredible.
not like meeting a movie star. You know?
It's just
A person that wrote a book,
yeah.
the books that Lyman wrote,
Yes.
and then you speak with him.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Tremendous, George Lamming out of Barbados. And he's one of those who, he have a saying, he says, being a Caribbean man makes me more of a Barbadian than being a Barbadian makes me a Caribbean man. Isn't that beautiful? But that's him. He have these brilliant sayings that really goes to the very soul and the very intellect and the very purpose of who we are as Caribbean people. And remember that the Caribbean, what some of our some of the scholars would use the term the Caribbean civilization, because it's an evolving process over the last 300 to 400 years, and we are part of it. We are part of that making and that doing, and we are still to a degree in our infancy. And this area that I work with, literature, through House of Nahesi Publishers, Caribbean literature is in its infancy. It's a young literature, but it's one of the most dynamic, competitive literatures of the world.
I don't know if it was Fabian I was speaking with on the show. House of Nahesi is just a powerhouse in the region.
We try.
It's
And still in our baby stage. But Fabian is the exact person to talk to, because he would agree with you, right? He runs it. He runs it.
It's a powerhouse, man.
I appreciate the support in those areas, but we have so much more to do and so further to go, And it's interesting you say that. I was speaking with Cynthia Wilson, one of the teachers of teachers out of UWI Trinidad, and she says yes. She says at UWI Trinidad, when we talk of publishing in the Caribbean, there's 4 publishers. She says, there's Casa Las Americas out of Cuba. Everybody knows that they've been doing tremendous work. She said there's UWI Press, out of the University of West Indies, the thing. And then Ian Randall out of Jamaica, because he's one who have been able to take Caribbean publishing certain books to trade, to push to different parts of the world. And I'm agreeing with her. I'm shaking my head. Yeah, you're right. And then she says, and House of Nahesi. And I'm like, oops. So people do see that, but it's the quality of the work. And like I said, we are far from where we could be or should be or want to be. We are still doing baby steps at this thing. But it tells you how much is needed, the mere fact that we would be acknowledged by these institutions, because of the type of work that we produce.
It's remarkable for a very small island. You come along in what, 30 plus years?
Yeah.
So we got to really congratulate
since 1980. It was founded in 1980 in my college dorm, basically.
So it's what, 43?
It's over that.
Yeah.
It's we have to keep going, and I'm very thankful to the St. Martin people, because that is ultimately our base. That is ultimately our audience. That is ultimately the publics that first even when we do a writer from abroad, the audience that come to know that writer or that book first is the St. Martin people. We don't play the game like, we do it here, but it's for elsewhere. Nah, the St. Martin people are our base. It's our ground level, and then it swims out to where the writer may be from.
Let me ask you, you plan to do a one-man poetry stand-up again sometime?
Again, whoa. Yeah, well, should I organize that? I can't, you'll have to ask somebody like that, because I run from those type of things, It's sometimes reading, and no one believes me when I say reading is terrifying.
But you got to do it again. You know why? You got to do it again, because it will show how we have transformed.
That is true.
As an island and a people.
That is true.
From the early 1980s to now. Try it out. You never know. I think you're going to be
pleasant. It's worth it. I would throw it at the book fair people. They do tremendous work too over the last 20 years in bringing in audiences and new writers and new ideas and giving people that courage to just push on. In studies, our children would think now of different things to study, compared to, say, the same 30 years ago, because of the activities of a publisher being in his community, or a book fair, or the book club of the ladies,
Right.
you've interviewed them, and some of our media who do tremendous work just by being there and pressing on. And so this is the area I'm in, and I want to show how that area is connected to other areas of success and successes in this nation.
Well, Lasana Sekou, man, I want to thank you. We're proud of the work you're doing. Continue doing a great job. Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you. Well, you know, it's good to be here, and to thank you and to thank the people of St. Martin, and also to hope that you will continue doing your work you're doing. It's a platform, and I've sent this out more than once in our media. The platform, your programs have consistently, and those who have been consistent in this area, but you're the big daddy of them. And I say that in a very complimentary way, because the platform that you provide for so many areas of St. Martin, in music, in the arts, in business, in health, to let the people know what we are doing, what we are succeeding in, and in the areas where we are challenged, how we are seeking to resolve these things to move forward. And you cannot put a number on that. You cannot put a price on that. If people don't have a media, they don't have a voice.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again and wish you much success, all right?
Thank you. Appreciate
And
it.
that's it for now. See you next time on Hot 99.9 FM radio or Facebook and YouTube. Take care. Bye.